Hey guys, today I'm going to be discussing the Oregon Trail. Often regarded as one of the most famous immigration trails taken during the 1840s era of westward expansion, which saw the vast migration of settlers from the eastern end of the United States migrate towards the westward to any area where they deemed fit for population. The Oregon Trail was not the only trail used during this period of travel, some taking mountain trails, boats, horseback, and so on to reach an area of land to call their own. Many were driven by ideals, beliefs, religion, and even greed to conquer, take, spread out, and even bring the word of God to the natives within the previously unreached areas of the American frontier. A simple look at any map of the Oregon Trail, one can see the trail begins and ends at the same locations that former explorers Lewis and Clark had taken, yet it is the bulk of this journey that is different, as Lewis and Clark headed further north, while the Oregon Trail headed south. Much like the tales of the frontier, the Oregon Trail has been romanticized and serves as an important aspect in the formation of the nation as we know it today, from its discovery to the gold rush of 1849 to its etching in American history. The story of the Oregon Trail's discovery can be traced back to the year 1812 in the town of Fort Astoria. A young Scottish immigrant named Robert Stewart set off with his party of 6 other travelers to deliver goods and dispatches from Astoria to New York, with a crew stopping off in St. Louis, Missouri. The road headed there was fierce, with travelers enduring attacks from Native Americans, the harsh elements of the landscape, and also the constant loss of supplies, whether from use or from theft. Much of the journey relied on the group traveling next to the Snake River, which extends through several states. An important note is that while several cities and forts would be built along the trail in the coming years, when Stewart and his men had initially set off on the trails, they were barren, with no assistance from neighboring towns. Much of their food came from hunting with their own equipment. Author David Dare makes note of a sad instance during one of the hunting parties in his book The Oregon Trail, an American Saga. On page 42, he said, "After a considerable trouble, they killed the animal. So ravenous were their appetites, they ate part of the animal raw." Ooh. The men had been so starved at this point in the trail that they had become nearly like wild animals. In truth, history loves to paint tales of exploration with a paintbrush that romanticizes the tales and leaves out the very real struggles of those who survive it. Um, Such was a case that happened on April 30th, 1813, when the men had finally arrived in St. Louis, Missouri. Word traveled fast of the trail that the men had discovered, and Missouri Gazette editor Joseph Charles was quick to interview Stewart about the journey. Stewart mentioned the harsh situations and summarized the natural beauty of the landscape, but Charles only carried over the aspects of the interview relating to the natural beauty and the time saved by taking this trail, leading many to believe that the journey was rather a pleasant one, but they did not get the full picture of what it truly was. With the rise in the belief of manifest destiny, which inevitably led to westward expansion, many decided to pack up their belongings, hitch up their wagons, and head west to procure a spot of land that they could call their own. An increase in such theology could have been caused by the rise in the Industrial Revolution that was predominant on the eastern seaboard at the time. People were living in crowded streets, apartment complexes that nearly bordered the nearby factories, so it was quite easy to understand why many would haul their worldly possessions to an area of sprawling spaces and the promises of owning land rather than having to rent out an apartment. Another reason that sparked the interest in the settlers moving west was the influx of missionaries returning from their travels on the frontier. According to Derry, who actually covered this in the same book on page 72, he said the missionaries made Americans aware of the economic advantages of the Oregon country. Their books, speaking tours, it painted a picture of an agricultural paradise. In essence, the spread of the gospel helped to spread the influence of American culture from the East Coast to the West. In the year 1838, a traveling reverend named Jason Lee came back from his touring the western frontier and informed all who would hear him of the natural beauty of the landscape, thus furthering the romanticism that Americans were beginning to develop about the West Coast. Around the same time, a Missouri senator by the name of Lewis F. Lynn, I nearly said Finn there, sorry, called for military occupation and the formation of a government within the Oregon country. According to author Gary McElhenny, sorry, I'm terrible with names, entry in the textbook Understanding American History, Volume 1, he sums it up best by saying that national pride, missionary zeal, the lure of cheap land, and the favorable reputation of the region all played a part in enticing thousands to Oregon at the time. That was stated on page 313, by the way. The discovery of California would soon open up the floodgates of people taking the Oregon Trail in order to reach what they're thought to believe promised land at the time. What settlers soon found out was that the romanticism of the American frontier was just that, romanticism. The actual trail was a bitter one. People were dying on the trail was a common occurrence on the survivability of those crossing the Oregon Trail. The total number of people who did not finish the journey, according to stats, turned to be around 4 to 6%, so some 12,000 to 24,000 deaths would occur on this trail. The greatest threats to life were accidents, diseases, reports of someone being hurt or killed by firearms, animals, accidental drownings, or even hypothermia. In many respects, life is a harsh reality, and not everyone can make it to the promised land, or the winner's circle, as they would call it. But yet the settlers persevered, for their own goals, whether it be for gold, God, or glory. Well, the next historical event placed more emphasis on gold. Around the year 1849, gold was discovered in the state of California, with many moving westward in search of the treasure. According to author and historian David Derry, I actually found 2 books by him, in his book Entrepreneurs of the Old West, after he was stated as saying, after gold was discovered in California, many gold seekers left their families, planning to strike it rich and then return home wealthy men. They often came totally unprepared. That was on page 102. Many would purchase their supplies from stops alongside the Oregon Trail on their way to California, which usually meant that they were unprepared for the trail to begin with, as well as the timing of the journey, since by the time most arrived to lay claim to gold, it was nearly gone, with most only finding specks of it rather than the nuggets that they thought they were hoping for. Anyway, the influx of hopeful gold hunters led to an increase of people traveling along the trail, as well as an increase of towns along the trail itself. But with the decline in people searching for gold, inevitably it led to the decline of the use of the trail. There were many reasons that eventually led to the Oregon Trail to be less used and more forgotten. According to the World History Group's article dealing with the overall history of the Oregon Trail, they were stated as saying the many offshoots of the trail and the main trail itself were used by an estimated 350,000 settlers from 1830 through 1869. When the first railroad was complete, allowing faster and more convenient travel, use of the trail quickly declined. That actually happens a lot. With the rise of newer forms of transportation and offshoots created by the pioneers, the Oregon Trail became a thing of the past. No longer were people inclined to risk the months on the trail, instead choose to rely on a system of tracks that would take them mere days to cover the exact same vast distance. The tale of the pioneers, even the Oregon Trail, would not be forgotten, though, as many books, films, and other forms of media would have placed the trail in the minds of generations after its decline. The actual trail can still be visited. Books like Little House on the Prairie, and yes, even the classic video game The Oregon Trail, ensure that the history of both the land and those who had the will to cross it would not be forgotten. According once again to David Derry in his book The Oregon Trail, an American Saga, he summarized it the best, that even though there was all the heartache, all the pain, the troubling journeys, he ultimately concluded that it is indeed a national treasure. In truth, history should be remembered for what it is, and for not what it should be romanticized as, to be taken at face value and appreciated for how it has shaped modern society. History, like the Oregon Trail, is fraught with peril, hardships, death, but is also filled with hopes and dreams and ideals of people who lived it. The Oregon Trail gave way for many who would eventually settle in the West Coast area of the United States, and thus it serves as an important aspect of the settling of the American frontier. From its discovery by Robert Stewart and his fellow travelers wishing to simply sell their dispatches to the American gold rush, to the place it earned in the hearts of historians who appreciate it to this day. Um, I hope you guys really take time to actually look into a bit of history about the Oregon Trail. I had a lot of fun researching it, and I hope you guys have a lot of fun researching your videos too. Okay, thanks. Bye.